Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Swift Nation. This is my very first storytelling video. I'm going to be counting down 3 scary Let's Not Meet Again stories. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and if you guys do, make sure you drop a like. It always supports the channel. And if you guys have any personal scary stories you guys would like to submit, make sure you guys submit it in with the email in the description down below. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let's get started. Number 1. This happened to my father in 1975 in a little country bumpkin town when he was 7 years old and his sister was 9. I will be typing this out as he recounts what happened. My father was a truck driver who had to be up at 2 a.m. every morning. That meant we had a rule in the house, and that meant no matter what, you can't wake daddy up when he goes to bed at 7 p.m. My mother worked at an old folks home every night. It was our bedtime one night, so me and my sister went to bed. In a couple of minutes I heard something hitting the side of the house. And I started hitting my window. It was really weird, so I got my sister to come to my room. We looked out the window and saw a man bouncing on one of my toys against the window and catching it. He put his hand to his mouth and motioned us to be quiet. Then he motioned for us to go outside and play with him. We were frozen in fear, and we started walking away and we couldn't see him out the window. We ran to the kitchen and there he was, motioning for us to open the sliding door. We knew we couldn't wake daddy up, so we ran and hid in the living room. The man walked to our front door and started whispering something we couldn't understand and making scratching noises. All we could do was cry and remain paralyzed. We saw car lights approaching the house. It was my mother returning home from work. We watched as the man ran off the porch and hid behind my father's truck. We watched the man smile and wait till our mother got out of the car. She got out, opened the trunk, got her belongings, and walked up to the porch. I'm embarrassed to say that we were too scared to open the door and warn her. All we could do was watch as the man sneakily tiptoed behind her. She opened the front door and shut it behind her. She saw us hiding, and just as she was about to yell at us for being up so late, she saw our fear-struck eyes glued to the glass on the back door. She turned around and saw his face pressed against the glass and him jiggling the doorknob. She screamed, put all of her weight up against the door, locked the door, and called my grandfather, who lived a street over. Then the man shouted profanities and how he was going to rape her children in front of her. She called the police and told them as well. Next thing we know, my grandfather is speeding up the driveway with his gun out the window, just firing it randomly. The cops pulled up just as soon as the man took off into the woods. They saw his back, but that was it. They chased through the woods with dogs and had the whole squad out searching. Other officers inspected the house and saw multiple scratch marks at our doors and the side of the house. Apparently he tried to break in and couldn't, so we tried to lure us into letting him in. They never found who it was, and that was the last time we ever saw them. We were all pretty traumatized for a while, but it didn't bother our dad one bit. In fact, he didn't wake up the entire time. So weirdo, back in 75, I'm so glad we haven't met again, cause if we do, you'll be the one who says, let's not meet. Number 2. This happened to my parents back in the late 80s. They were in their mid-20s when this all occurred. My parents decided to go camping in cool California. When they got there, it was kind of late. My mom was sitting down on a log while my dad was unpacking the trunk. While sitting down, she heard walking around the campsite, so she went and quickly told my dad she heard someone walking around. They got the F out of there just in case. They drove about 3 miles down the road with their headlights off so they wouldn't be followed. Once they got there, they set up a camp and began to drink their asses off while listening to a boxing match on the radio. Eventually they settled in for the night. Now they don't know for sure that this next event is connected to the first one, but they believe it is. So they settled in, and my dad was asleep before my mom. My mom was in the halfway state where you're half awake and half asleep. Suddenly she heard footsteps outside the tent. She abruptly snapped back to consciousness and listened. She tried waking my dad up, but he was way too out of it. She listened to what seemed like hours when suddenly she hears, in the creepiest voice you could ever possibly imagine, say, "Here I am. I'm going to kill you." While saying this, the man ran what she believes to be a knife along the tent. She could hear him walking and dragging the knife. She was literally frozen. She couldn't say anything or move. She finally snapped out of it and screamed, "Jim, grab the shotgun and kill this son of a bitch." My dad finally awoke. They heard snapping of twigs and footsteps and heard the guy running away, of course. My parents didn't have a shotgun. It was just a huge bluff that actually worked. My dad got up seconds later and began to run after him, but he was long gone. After that, my parents decided that they were getting the F out of there before anything else happened. When they saw their tires were slashed, they were in the middle of nowhere and had no way out with some maniac that wanted to kill them. They actually tried blowing up the tires with one of those things you use to blow up rafts. Obviously that didn't work, but they had to try, right? About an hour or so later, a ranger was patrolling the area, came along and helped them out. He brought them back to town so they could get their tires fixed. While talking to the ranger, they found out that he had been searching for any suspicious activity due to some recent murders nearby. My parents were likely the murderer's next victims. I tried finding some of the murder cases online, but was unable to. Number 3. First post. I'm not the greatest at telling stories, so please bear with me. I'm not sure if this belongs here since it wasn't exactly creepy, but extremely scary. When I was 14, I met a guy named James. He was 17. I dated him for 5 years. I'm now 30. I grew up very poor to a teenage mother. I never met my father till I was around 20. I made some pretty bad choices as a young lady. James was a big-time drug dealer at the time. I found that thrilling and so cool. It was a typical abusive relationship. He cheated on me a lot, would physically, mentally, and emotionally abuse me. He would then buy me things or give me money to make it all better. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't know any better and had a poor self-esteem. His money took me away from my poor home life, so I stayed for 5 years. This happened when I was 17. James and his brother Victor bought a house in a really nice neighborhood. Victor was a single guy, the player type. He had a random girl over visiting that night. James and I were going to bed. It was around midnight. Victor and his new girl left the house and took James's vehicle. James and I were alone in the house. About 2 minutes after Victor left, we heard a knock at the door. James gets up and says, "He must have forgotten his keys." I'm in bed. I hear James say, "You have the wrong house. You need to F off." He comes running into the room telling me to close the door as we hear the door getting kicked down. 2 men entered the house. One was wearing a bandana over his face, and the other guy I didn't recognize. He was trying to hide his identity. They tried kicking down the bedroom door as we did our best to hold our weight against it. We were screaming and begging them to leave. At one point, the bandana guy got his arm and leg through the door. I made eye contact with him. He dropped his sawed-off shotgun. I reached for it, and it seemed to back off a little bit. The other guy grabbed the gun. Out of fear, I couldn't recognize him, but I felt something in the stare he gave me. We thought they were after drugs and money. We had no weapons. The money and drugs were in a separate bedroom. They didn't take anything. It wasn't a robbery. They were there to give someone a beating. James was on the phone with the police the whole time this was happening. The guys took off. It was time to check what they took and hide the drugs. The police arrived and we noticed a bullet hole in the wall in the bedroom directly beside the room we were in. Found out later it was because the bandana guy hit the gun out of the other guy's hand and tried to shoot me through the door. I went home the next day completely traumatized, not wanting to tell my family anything what that happened. They all gossiped. I walked in the door and my grandmother knew about the home invasion. My family knew that James was a drug dealer, but they weren't really concerned. I thought at the time someone who James knew must have known someone in my family since she said a female cousin told her. My cousin Anthony's wife called me saying, "Anthony wants to say sorry, but you weren't supposed to be there." Again, I was dumb and assumed someone in the thug world told them. We lived in a small city. I was so naive and convinced it was a robbery from a rival drug dealer or something. That wasn't the case at all. We spent weeks waiting for them to come back. James made sure he always had a few scary guys with guns in the house. I realize now that this only added to my trauma. A few months later after this happened, I'm at James' house reading the newspaper. I see my cousin Anthony and another guy in the most wanted section. The other guy looked vaguely familiar. Anthony is gang related, were the same age, and grew up extremely close. Although he got locked up at age 13, he's been on and off ever since. Anthony and I would write to each other. We had a strong bond. The phone rings, it's a girl named Carly that is completely in love with Victor. But since he's a player, he treats her like crap. She brings up mugshots in the paper and says that, "That's your cousin, right?" She confesses to me that the home invasion was because of her. The other guy in the mugshot liked her. She told him how Victor would slap her around and force her to get an abortion. My cousin Anthony was his friend. They made her tell them where Victor lived, and they watched the house until they seen what they thought was me and James leaving. I knew if I told them, he would have her shot. Also, because it was my cousin, I assumed I would get some blame or have to show James thugs where my cousin lived. Regardless of what he did, I'm stupidly loyal to my family. I seen Anthony at a family function a few years later. He said sorry and that he loves me and that it wasn't his fault. That was 13 years ago. My life is completely different now. I am an upstanding member of society, but I still feel a lump in my throat when I talk about it. I can't go to a gun range without having an all-out panic attack. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope you found these stories interesting. If you guys did, make sure you guys leave a like. If you guys ended up watching the whole video, make sure you guys comment down below what story scared you guys the most. Personally, I think story number 1 scared me the most. This was really fun, guys, and I want to definitely do more of these in the future. And again, if you guys want to submit any personal stories that you guys have encountered, make sure you guys do submit them with the email provided in the description down below. But I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.